Welcome to Adobe Photoshop CS6, Clone Stamp Tool, History Brush, Eraser Tool, and Paint Bucket Tool. After completing this unit, you will be able to adjust your images using the Clone Stamp Tool, adjust your images using the History Brush, erase areas of your image using the Eraser Tool, and fill areas of your image using the Paint Bucket Tool. The first tool we will examine in this unit is the Clone Stamp Tool, whose shortcut is S. This tool can sample or clone pixels from one part of the image and paint or stamp them onto another part of the image. If I select the Clone Stamp Tool, I get a brush tool whose size I can change just like any other brush tool, up in the options window or using the brackets, like this. Now, in order to take a sample of pixels from the image, I must press and hold the Alt key. You will notice that the cursor has changed from a brush head to a crosshair for sampling. While holding the Alt key, you can now position the cursor over the sample area or area you want to clone and left-click your mouse. Now, before you release the Alt key, you can set the relative position of the cloning or sampling and the painting or stamping. So if I move my cursor to this position before I release the Alt key, you can see that the cloning is happening where the little crosshair is and the stamping is happening where the brush head is. Be careful when using this tool that the sample area remains on a selection of pixels that you want and that it does not sample from an undesired part of the image. You can always resample and change the relative position of the brush and the sample area like this. And as with all tools, you can see the various options in the options window, the most significant of which is this button here, which toggles the brush panel for making specific brush adjustments. Many of the other options are self-explanatory: mode, opacity, flow, etc. The rest we can examine in later courses, along with this sub-tool here, which is the pattern stamp tool. The next tool here is the History Brush. This tool can help you create great effects with more accuracy. The first thing I want to show you in relation to this tool is the history window. As we know from the earlier unit on the user interface, we can find the history window here in the window drop-down menu. Just click on History to make the history window appear in the workspace. Now when we perform an action, be it painting or erasing something, you can track these actions in the history window. If you do something you are not happy with, you can just click back through each action in the history window to return to a state before you perform the offending action. At the top of the history window, you can see the original version of the image you were working on. And if after an hour or two working on it you decide you want to restore the image to the way it was in the beginning, just click on this at any time and the image will return to its original state. Now if I make a dramatic adjustment to the image, like this, I'll go to the image adjustments and desaturate to make the image black and white. I can now create a new historical snapshot of this new black and white version by clicking the Create New Snapshot button here. This has now created a new snapshot of my image in black and white. Now, if I select my History Brush tool and paint on the image is being restored to the snapshot of the original image. I can reverse this selection by changing the source of the History Brush back to the black and white image by setting the black and white image as the snapshot source of the brush like this. This tool can be used with layers also, and with any stage of snapshot you might wish to create. You can create multiple snapshots. And don't forget, I can change the size of the brush just like any other brush tool up in the options window or using the square brackets. The subset tool here is the Art History Brush, which can be used in a very similar way, but its primary function is to create artistic effects like paintbrush strokes, and we can cover this tool in future courses. The next tool in this unit is the Eraser tool, with the shortcut E. This essential brush tool has many of the standard options in the options window such as size, mode, opacity, etc., and can be adjusted using the square brackets like any other brush tools. When you paint with the Eraser tool, you remove pixels from the image down to the background contents, which are most often white or transparent depending on how the image file was created. You can also erase pixels down to the history state if you select this option here. This works as per the History Brush depending on which source the History Brush is set to. In this case, black and white, so we can erase down to the black and white state. The subsets of this tool are the background eraser, which erases pixels completely through the background contents, making the area transparent. And the final subset in this tool is the magic eraser tool, which selects pixels to a set tolerance and deletes them, almost like using a magic wand and pressing delete. Try to adjust the magic eraser tool's tolerances to find the right setting for the job. The final tool in this unit is the paint bucket tool, with the shortcut G. This tool is used to fill areas of your image with specific colors from the color palette. If I make a selection with the marquee tool here, and I cut the selection out, I can now fill this area with the foreground color using the paint bucket tool. Like all tools, I can change the options of the tools up here, selecting a preset version of the tool, setting which color I use, foreground or pattern, and change the mode of fill, opacity, etc. And we can look at these in detail in future courses. The subset tools here are the 3D material drop tool and the gradient tool. We will look at the 3D material drop tool in a future course, but let's have a look at the gradient tool now. This tool allows you to create a gradient from the foreground color to the background color. You just click and drag the tool from where you want the foreground color to start to the point where you want the background color to end, and it fills in the gradient in the middle. The options for this tool are, of course, in the options window, and as you can see, we have options to create different types of gradient, like the one we used here, a linear gradient, or radial, angle, reflected gradients, etc. We can look at these, the color palette, and foreground and background colors in a later unit. The clone stamp tool samples or clones pixels from one part of the image and paints or stamps them onto another part of the image. The history brush restores the image to various historical states from the history window. The eraser tool erases selected pixels to the background layer or to the transparent layer. The paint bucket tool fills selected parts of the image to the desired color or gradient.